Hi there. My name is Anna Mullen, and I am Communications Director for National Farm to School Network. And in the second half of 2020, I participated in Nonprofit Marketing Guide's mentorship program for communications directors. And as a part of that program, I shared some tips and tricks and lessons learned from my many years of remote working in a communications department. And knowing that lots of folks, especially in the nonprofit field, are doing remote working for the first time or are continuing to sort of settle in to the remote work life, I'm happy to share those learnings and tips with you as well. So, a little bit of context setting. National Farm to School Network, the organization I work for, is a national nonprofit organization that serves as the leading voice for the US Farm to School movement. And Farm to School is all of the ways that kids eat, grow, and learn about food in their educational settings. And we really see Farm to School as having the potential to help build strong and just local food systems across our country. We were founded in 2007, and since our founding, we have been a national remote staff. So while a lot of folks I know are still learning the ways of remote working and home offices, it's something that we have more than 13 years of experience in. We currently have 11 full time staff and four part time fellows and interns, and then a handful of contractors that we work with. And we span almost every time zone across the United States. I have more than 6 years of remote working experience in communications departments. And so this presentation is a bit tailored to those things that I have found work really well for remote team management and project management with that kind of communications hat on my head, and hope that there will be a few thoughts in here that will be helpful to you, regardless if you are remote still or in person or in some hybrid in between. I think there are four big buckets of things when I condense this down that make for successful remote work environments. And so these are sort of the big categories that I'll touch on over the next few minutes. The first thing is a really foundational one, regardless of your work setting, if you're remote or in person or in some hybrid. But internal communications, those ways that your staff stay in touch with each other and collaborate and keep each other up to date on what is happening, is really important. I think for me as a communications director in a department that really helps serve the purpose of promoting what the rest of the organization is doing, this is also really important to me that this is working well. Also important to note, though, that it is not just my responsibility as communications director to set these things for our team and sort of dictate or write in stone, this is the way we do internal communications. I think internal communications really have to come from staff themselves. There has to be buy in and organizational leadership support of developing systems of communicating together across your organization that will work for everyone. Here's an overview of how National Farm to School Network currently approaches that. These are our key internal communications channels. And you can see we kind of have them broken out into internal communications, so those just staff communications that are happening in coordination, external communications, things that are essentially happening outside of our team, and then how many people are involved in those communications. And that's a very rough sort of overview of the way that we differentiate these channels and how we use them. One thing that we've learned is that it's really important to revisit this on a pretty regular basis, every 6 months, every year, to make sure that everyone's still on the same page and that these ways of thinking about how we communicate together still work for us. If not, it can result in some kind of miscommunication and headaches and things being lost in translation. But really foundational to doing your work well. So, especially if you're new to the remote workspace as a team or as an organization, like spending some time coming to agreements on here's how we're going to communicate with each other and keep each other in the loop is time well spent. Similarly, keeping organized with all of your files and documents is really important to the remote workspace. We don't have at National Farm to School Network any physical offices. We all work from home offices. So almost all of our files, all of our documents live in cloud services. And here's the three main ones that we use that have worked for us. One thing you'll notice is they're not really fancy tools. These are pretty standard that a lot of folks are familiar with. And we found that they work really well for us when we use them as our primary tools for keeping organized. The first is Google Drive. This is where all of our living documents, our working documents, tend to be housed. Anything that we're collaborating on with folks outside of our organization, Google Docs tends to be a good tool for us. Um, great for tracking changes, great for tagging people for action. One challenge I think sometimes with Google Drive is that file organization can be a little tricky. A lot of that happens on the user side. Also can be a little bit tricky if like you're working with someone external to your organization, is the owner of a file that you depend on, and then that person goes away or changes their job or that file gets deleted. We've had that issue before too. So the way we treat Google Docs again is like our live living documents. And then when we're done with a project or a thing is finalized, we download it and move it into Dropbox, which we treat as kind of like our archive or our organizational server. It's where all of our final documents and master documents go. And then we use Slack more as like a project management tool. So we have channels for all of our projects and then all of our departments, and then some other channels thrown in as well. Again, this is a primary internal communication system for us that works really well, again, through its tagging system, through the abilities to sync up to other systems, like we have it integrated with Dropbox and Google Drive. One of the things that I love about Slack is its searchability. Slack is actually an acronym for Searchable Log of All Communications and Knowledge, which I love. And I actually find this really helpful when we're onboarding like a new teammate to a project. Instead of having to sort through old email chains and finding past information that might be relevant, when all of that knowledge is saved or all that communication is saved on Slack, makes it, I think, way easier to make sure everyone is in the loop. And when someone new is being onboarded, for them to see those things. I've listed here a few hacks that I think are kind of fun that have worked well for me, may or may not be new to you. Um, but my favorite one right now is the custom stickers and emojis, and Slack is a fun way to just bring some laughs around the office. Our new favorite Slack sticker is the Bernie Sanders mitten meme is a favorite response. So a few things specific to my role as a communications director in a remote workspace that may be helpful ideas for you to hear. Um, Again, as I said earlier, our communications department really functions well when we are communicating and collaborating with our other departments, with our programs department, with our policy department, event staff, etc. So one thing that I really value is transparency and collaboration across the organization. And so, what that's meant for me is that when I'm developing communications plans and content calendars, I use systems that are going to be familiar to the rest of our staff. I know that a lot of folks have had great success and make really beautiful things like their communications calendars and content calendars in Asana and in Airtable and other really awesome project management tools. Our staff just doesn't use them. And I've found that when I try to use new systems, if I don't have buy in from the rest of the organization and the rest of our staff, they just don't get used. So I stick to the ones that I just shared in the previous slide. A lot of my communications planning documents and content calendars, campaign documentation is all done in Google Drive. And I find that that's more accessible to the rest of the team to be able to give input and help me do my work better, and me help support their work too. We have a comms content channel on Slack that I sort of use as my like FYI and tag people when I need things space. So you can see this example to the right of me updating the team that we have a newsletter going out soon. This is great for me to tag them to say, here are things I need from you, or here are things that you told me you'd like to include, and I'm planning to include them. Also, a good way just to make sure I'm not missing anything important. So, try to have that transparency of like, here's what's coming up, here's what I need from you, here's how you can help me. You'll also see at the top there, I've pinned our content calendars. Again, in the spirit of like transparency and collaboration, will admit that as a whole on our in our organization, not everyone remembers that that's there, that they can look at it and have access to seeing what's coming up on our content calendars and what we're planning for. But in general, like to try to make sure that they know they have accessibility to that so that they're not always having to ask me for it. A few other tips I've learned, as you might be picking up, file organization I think is really key in this remote work environment. I'm not passing people in the hallway or talking over my computer screen or popping into someone's office. A lot of our work is done sort of in physical isolation from from each other, and so to avoid that sort of miscommunication or sort of lost opportunity, having some consistency in the way that we manage our projects and campaigns and the way that we file that information or organize those documents and materials is just really essential to making sure that no one is out of the loop or missing any big pieces of a project. Similarly, I think that spending some time developing standard processes and procedures, especially across departments, has been really beneficial to us. Like, and really carving out some time to do that well. So, for example, I have a procedures document with our policy director that sort of outlines all of our steps and roles when any federal policy news is happening, whether that be a bill being introduced or a grassroots advocacy campaign being planned or a statement that needs to be put out in response of something. And this is something we've spent time building out so that when those action opportunities come, we have a roadmap to get us there and to get us there quickly. Again, just a little extra step that in our remote workspace, I think helps a lot because we don't have a natural opportunity to see each other in the office and talk about that. Well, of course, we pick up the phone a lot or G chat each other a lot. Having sort of that roadmap there that both of us know about and is saved saves that extra legwork when those opportunities do arrive. Two other things that, again, feel really natural in any sort of project management, but can be very easily overlooked in a remote workspace when you're working in isolation from your team, is spending time debriefing at the end of a project. Put it on your calendar, build it into your campaign timeline to at the end of a project or a campaign or the completion of a quarter to spend some time reviewing what you've done together, what worked well, what you change differently next time. That's something that we've learned over time. If we don't build intention around, just gets completely overlooked. So building in some time for that is important. And similarly, building in ways to celebrate successes together. Um, I say very often that the thing I miss most about being a remote staff is like we don't get to go to happy hour together. We don't get celebratory lunches together. So we have to build in that space in other ways. We have a celebrate channel on Slack. We do lots of virtual high fiving, but it's as equally important as these other things of like making projects successful and campaign work successful is also celebrating it, and it matters. I think to team morale for folks to know that their good work is being seen. Something else that has been a challenge for me in my remote work setup, but I think there's also a lot of opportunity around is thought partnership. So I work from a home office by myself during the day, which in a lot of ways is great. But sometimes I need someone to like bounce ideas off of. And my dog is not a lot of help when I'm asking, like, does the way I'm saying this make sense? Or do you have any thoughts of how I can approach this wall I'm running up against? So really take advantage of the amazing professional network that we're a part of nonprofit communicators. There are lots of folks out there um, who have amazing knowledge that you can tap into, and that similarly, like you can offer your own knowledge to as well. So here are a few of the spaces that I do that in and have really found beneficial to my professional development. Also, I think just making me a better communications director. Nonprofit Marketing Guides mentorship program, like I mentioned, that I just completed at the end of 2020 was fabulous for this. I'm a big fan of Facebook groups. There are a lot out there for nonprofit storytellers and communicators and remote work professionals that are great to tap into. The search functions in those tend to work pretty well for me actually and can give me quick answers to things that on my own I'm just like puzzling over. I'm a big fan of listservs. The Radical Communicators Network listservs, wonderful. I'm a part of a lot of, I'm in the food system, so like food systems related listservs, both great to jump into to just like observe bigger conversations. And I found that it's sparked a lot of ideas for me that I hadn't thought of before. Um, and also, again, to like be a contributor to those spaces. The last thing I want to mention that I'm working on personally is I can't tell you the number of folks I've come across who've said, like happy to reach out and thought partner with you or happy to take you up if you need support in any way. And I'm trying to be better at taking them up on it. When someone says that they're willing to support me on something or to be a thought partner or to mentor me on certain aspects of work that I'm working on, to not leave that option untapped. There's a lot of really smart people out there, I think, in our field of work too, who are happy to help. And so to take them up on it and to avoid that feeling of being siloed off and in isolation in your home office, especially I don't know if I've said it yet. I'm a really small communications team. It's just me, and I have a really fabulous intern, but have really found a great community of other nonprofit communications professionals out there that I'm able to tap into to make me feel supported in this work. So, a few thoughts on remote team management. Again, these are things that feel really basic to me, but without some intention behind them, can be totally lost in the remote workspace. The first is making sure that you define roles and expectations really clearly and to check in on them regularly. I think sometimes when we're only checking in over the phone or over email, you can kind of miss some of those cues that, like, something's not quite going as expected, or there's a problem spot, or yeah, or like that there's something sticky that needs to be worked through. And so building in time to regularly check in is really important, because the sort of like small interactions may not be happening as they might if you were in person in the office. Similarly, with meetings, I think it's essential in a virtual space to show up prepared and help others show up prepared by having an agenda, by outlining what the intention of the meeting is, what outcomes you're expecting, and if there are other ways that folks can come prepared, like, here are the things we're going to talk about, or here's the thing I need you to read so that you can engage fully in this conversation. There's so many distractions that happen around us in our home offices, not to mention just sitting at your computer and your inbox dinging at you, your Slack notifications coming across the screen. Don't give folks a reason to disengage. Make sure that they feel like their time is being valued and that that meeting space is well utilized. It can save just a lot of grumbling about another meeting that could have been an email. Two other things, trust building, again, so important, especially in a remote workspace. I have colleagues that I've never met in person, not by choice. I would love to meet my colleagues in person, but because it's just a reality sometimes of a national remote team. So building in time, especially on one-on-one check-ins, to just acknowledge that we are whole people who are more than just our work, and we have more that we can share than just our project updates, I think is really important, and can help feel or can help build up that sense of like trust and camaraderie on our teams. And then the last one has been valuable to me, but there's also a word of caution with it. I think time tracking, and I use Toggle to do that, can be really helpful for holding ourselves accountable in our home offices to make sure that we're not working all the time. This is something I learned when I was like very new to remote working, is that it just felt like I could be working all the time. And then I'd realize I'd be having like 10 or 12-hour days, which was not necessarily required of me, but just became really easy to slip into. So I use time tracking in part to keep myself accountable to how much I'm working, and then also to help me forward plan when I know that taking or that writing our monthly newsletter takes me approximately this hours a month, and doing this annual campaign from start to finish typically takes this much time over a quarter. It really helps me plan more reasonably for what we're able to take on when I'm doing planning with the rest of our staff. So these last few slides are more generally about organizational culture and just making remote working work and taking advantage of the benefits of it. I won't read through every one of these, but just wanted to highlight some of the ways that National Farm to School Network um, really tries to build up a strong organizational culture and support our team and having a happy and successful remote work environment. The one I do want to call out is our weekly work plans. This is something we started doing in 2020, realizing that when we work remotely and that we're not all talking to each other every day, that sometimes opportunities could be missed, and saying, oh, I didn't know you were working on that thing. If I did, I would have connected you to this person I just talked to, or instances like that. And so we've started just posting very brief bulleted lists of like our top focuses and projects for the week, just to make sure that we're all feeling kind of connected and how our work is coming together and where we can pitch in to support each other. And then my last slide here is just a general one. Like I said at the very beginning, I know that remote working kind of has a learning curve to it, and it works really well for some people. As someone who's been working remotely for 6 years, I think it works pretty well for me and my personality type and my work style. That's not true for everyone. And there are also definitely some potential challenges with it, especially in that, like, finding that dividing line between what is your workspace and what is your home space when those two things collide. At the very beginning of the pandemic, our team, our whole staff, put together a blog of our top tips for remote working and making the most of remote working. Because again, we think there are a lot of benefits to it. And so if it's something that you've been struggling with a bit, to find the right balance for, invite you to check out some of these tips that we have and see if they might work for you. So that's my abbreviated version of everything I know and have learned from remote working in a communications department. I'll leave you with a thought of thought partnership. Again, I have found it really valuable to me in my professional career to have that sort of national network of folks who are doing important communications work, to change hearts and minds around the country too. And I think we have a lot to learn from each other and can benefit a lot by staying connected to each other. So please don't hesitate to reach out if this sparked anything and you'd like to discuss more, or if you have thoughts for me, I'd love to hear them. Thanks so much for your time and best of luck with your remote work setups.